How's it going, ladies and bruises? I'm Bobby Sixkilla and welcome back to Deluge. Now we just learned about May's, well, the intention that the Kuiper family have to relocate May at some boarding school. We don't know how that's going to go, but I guess that's going to be the focal point of this episode. Let's carry on. Lika told me they're moving her to a special facility. Called it, really, May? But she's an integral part of our town. I couldn't imagine not having her around, roaming the streets, harassing people, being weirdly obsessed with rocks. She turned more serious. Was this her parents' decision? To send her there? Or is this the church behind this? The church. Her parents aren't even her real parents. Where are they sending her? A place in Germany. Oh man, already? The Uelsenkirchen. She took out her phone. I think I've read about that place. Lika says they're optimally equipped to handle people struggling with her condition. Still, I don't like it. These types of places are often run by fundamentalists. They don't hold a rational view on psychiatric care, but consider a mental disease a symptom of spiritual impurity. They have a bad record of dealing with their clients. Take a look at this inspection report. She handed me her phone. It speaks of an unsafe environment with unsanitary living conditions. I've also found a lawsuit that's currently run against the institution, accusing personnel of false imprisonment and physical abuse. This isn't a place where they'll help me. They're locking her away in a private prison, maybe for good. I saw a panic foaming in Ina's eyes. You need to warn her, Abe. Now. What? Me? Why me? You're friends with her. She trusts you. I'll try to think of something. I was about to leave when Ina stopped me. Hey, do you remember the conversation we had the other day? About how May told you Abbot was never an island? I looked it up on the Heritage website and I'm afraid that I stand somewhat corrected. This area has undergone a lot of geological changes over the centuries. The Isle of Abbot was created by a terminal moraine, an elongated accumulation of stones and debris that was left by the glaciers of the late Ice Age. It used to stretch out long enough to reach the mainland, but due to rising waters it became an island around the year 1400. See, May is from the past. I knew it. So in a sense she was right, even though she probably just made it up. I mean, we haven't even covered this in high school. I wonder. It would be like May to know these things. When she talks about the past, I hesitated. Never mind. Yeah, she knows the shit's going on. I spent the following day restlessly contemplating my next move, while the uncertainty of May's approaching fate hung above me like a bronze sword. I asked myself if it would be better to follow Ina's advice and warn her of her impending move. Maybe May wouldn't even mind the prospect. It would be a change of environment for her, a chance to meet new people. I thought back at how much she enjoyed our trip to Rybury Beach, how much good the new surroundings had done her at the time. And lured by these optimistic thoughts, I found myself casting stones at her bedroom window. It wasn't long before she emerged from the adjacent workshop. Careful with those stones, you could break something. I thought it was custom around these parts. She giggled. We have single glazing, which makes it impossible to get insurance. Come on, let's go to my room. It's a nice house, though. She closed the door behind her. My parents are growing old and forgetful. I have to help them with a lot of things, especially since I'm an only child. I often wonder what will happen when they're no longer here. If I'll live here by myself to continue the farm. Do you want to? She thought for a while. I like it here. It's so close to the woods, although the farm work is demanding at times. I don't know if I'll be able to carry on. Still, I feel a very strong connection to this place. And when I saw the delighted glimmer in her eyes, I just couldn't put it off any longer. May, I've come to tell you something. Lika told me that the church wants to transfer you to a new school. In Germany. May stared at me uncomprehendingly. She said it would be a place where you'd be able to learn many new things. Lika? Did Lika really say that? I'm not sure if she came up with the idea, but she was the one who told me. I don't understand. I have to stay here. My parents need me. I don't want to be transferred. A faraway shimmer was forming in her eyes. I know I said the farm work was hard at times. Like the chickens. I know they aren't really brought to a hospital. They get killed, all of them, when a pandemic breaks out. Not just the hens, but the little chicks too. It doesn't matter if they're infected or not, it's just a preventative measure. Papa would always tell me that they were moved to a hospital just so that I wouldn't cry. But now that I'm older, I'm the one who oversees the process. And it doesn't change a thing. I still cry. Do you understand how hard it is? I want to stay here. I want to go to the dolmen with you. Why didn't Rika tell me? There was a knock at the outside door. May leapt up, letting out a muffled scream in the process. We hurried to the window, and in the faint light we saw a black Mercedes-Benz parked in the driveway. At the gate stood two dark-clothed figures, led by a handsome-looking man who appeared to be in his early 40s. That's John, Rika's father. Another knock, louder this time. Mama is home. She'll answer the door soon. May's voice was trembling with fear. Are they coming to transfer me? Not wanting to lie to her, I just stared at her wordlessly. I don't want to go. Why didn't Rika discuss this with me? Rika, I really don't want to... No. No. Her breath intensified. An abstract terror had formed in her eyes. Then she addressed me, clearer and more coherent than ever. I can't leave. I like it here. I like you, and Rika, and even the church. I have to stay here in Abbotsford, with the stones. I promise I won't cause any trouble. I'll stay inside. I'll try harder. Tell Rika to let me stay. Please, let me stay here. Tears are rolling down her cheeks. I need to stay here, to wait for him. I need to be here. In the meantime, I could hear Ms. Walsing answer the door and converse with John Kuiper. She sounded unfazed by the nocturnal visit, and it struck me that, like myself, she must have been informed beforehand. It wouldn't be long before she'd let the men in. May had sunk to her knees, paralysed with fear. The intensity of the movement weighed down on me, and I suddenly grew aware that right now we stood before a gambit that would irreversibly change both our futures. I looked her in the eyes. Her quivering form appeared so far removed from the cheerful girl I'd come to know that I suddenly felt a rare courage take hold of me. May, we could escape. And the second that last word passed my lips, she grew calm. Escape. We have to escape. Again. I'm not afraid, as long as I'm with you. Sigurd. At that moment, a tropical wind spread throughout the tiny bedroom, blowing back her golden hair and revealing the pale, spotless white of her mesmerized eyes. I'm not afraid. I trust you. If it's really you, Sigurd. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Is it really you? Is it really you? I mean, no. No. But... the dream. It must be you. Any more time to remember? Let's go with that. A relieved smile crossed her face. I'm so happy. That way I don't lie, you know? Come to the window. The drop wasn't more than a few meters. I leapt down at first, as I caught May, who was a lot heavier than I'd imagined. I heard the door to her room open. But May took me by the hand and led me out over the yard, into the nearby undergrowth. And I followed her, her golden hair guiding me through the pale moonlight. The first minutes were hectic. We crawled through the thick bushes, gradually growing aware of the frantic shouts and heavy footsteps that emerged from the house behind us. By the time that Kuiper and his henchmen had made their way outside, we'd left them far behind. Our progress was slow. We tried to stay away from the major footpaths and roads, taking detours whenever our path led us to overexposed terrain. But the woodlands surrounding Abbotsford were wild and expansive enough to disappear into. And so we did, for a good 3 hours until it was completely dark outside, and even May was uncertain of our current whereabouts. She looked exhausted. What do we do? Where do we go? I was hoping you would answer that question. Slowly we made our way through an opening in the trees that led to a narrow trail. May looked around, trying to discern our location. Then she let out a sigh of relief. I know this trail. It leads to the stones. I gestured her to lower her voice. Are you sure it's safe? She looked up at me drowsily, her eyes almost falling shut. I could tell she wouldn't make it much further. Let's go. In the dead of night, we arrived at the archaeological site. We settled down in an alcove between the two megaliths, where we were invisible from the road. I mean, surely they're going to look for her there. They know she's obsessed with stones. They feel warm, don't they? We're safe here. Before I could even say a word, she drifted off into sleep. and though I'd made a resolve to watch all night, it wasn't long before I joined her. Oh, we're totally gonna get caught. Aggressive shouting, footsteps. I found myself wide awake, tugging at May's sluggish body. Her eyes shot open. Danger! They're onto us, we need to move fast. I think they have a hound. In the corner of my eye, I saw two of Kuiper's men making their way in our direction. Then a white bolt split the sky. I saw one of the thugs rolling on the grass, clutching his leg in agony. It's Ferris. May had scrambled to her feet. Come on, run! While Ferris kept our assailants at bay, we bolted over the lawn, into the dense forest that led northward. May seemed sharper now, rejuvenated by the few hours of undisturbed sleep. We travelled where the woods were at their darkest, so that we had to find our way by touch. And though we keep moving, it wasn't long before we grew aware of an ominous rustling of the bushes behind us. I froze. We fear us, hopefully. May cowered beside me. The rustling intensified, the bushes opened. An out leapt Ferris, our silent protector. Not so silent, really. Ferris. May spoke in excited whispers. Thank you for helping us back there. They didn't hurt you, did they? Ferris sat panting quietly. Though I urged May to head on further, she remained concentrated on the dog. Ferris, can you help us with one more thing? We want to go to the castle hall. Do you remember? The place in the woods where the floor is covered in stone? The dog stared at her with a playful look in its eyes. There was no indication that it understood her request. Could you lead us there? I promise there'll be a real treat this time. The dog turned its head. Thank you. And through the thick undergrowth we continued slowly but steadily, never resting for longer than a minute. At times Ferris led the way, but he would also lag behind, seemingly oblivious to his surroundings. But from the highly inconsistent moss patterns on the trees, I could tell we were roughly travelling northward. Well, we made it. The morning light had grown in intensity and was now tentatively making its way through the blanket of misty trees. I felt tired to the point where I cursed myself for even embarking on this pointless journey. May, however, had grown unusually quiet. Carefully she made her way around the clearance, muttering softly to herself and casting anxious glances through the trees. Then she turned to me. We're fleeing again. Always fleeing, just like back then. We travelled for months, through impossible terrain, inhospitable terrain, but no matter how dangerous our journey was, I basked in a consoling bliss, for I'd reunited with Sigurd, my little brother, and my happiness drove away the fear. The terrain was made up of treacherous marshes, intersected by patches of pinewood. Over the past centuries, the sea had slowly encroached upon our settlements, gradually turning the arable pastures into basins of brackish swampland. Food became scarce, and many of the tribes that had been allied in the past resorted to warfare over the dwindling resources. Wherever we went, we were met with distrust and hostility. Travelling outcasts left to fend for ourselves, with only Sigurd's spear for protection. Then one day, when crossing a woodland fen, a large appendage lashed out from the shallow waters. It wrapped itself around Sigurd's waist, evading the blows of his spear, preparing to strike with its large toothed maw. When suddenly, out from the shadow leapt a great grey wolf, and the creature lunged its fangs deep into the snake's flank, lacerating its scaly armour. The serpent shrieked out in pain, dropping Sigurd as it turned its attention toward its canine assailant. It coiled itself around the wolf, trying to squeeze out its very life. But the wolf was strong, much stronger than any mortal beast, and it resisted the serpent's strangling grip, long enough for Sigurd to thrust his spear into the monster's gaping maw, impaling it in the mud. Slowly the wolf rose to its feet, shaking out its drenched fur. Bifree, the All-Mother, ancestor to our tribe, is capable of taking many forms. Although the serpent was defeated, we realized he was a herald of encroaching kind. As the sea spread out throughout our domains, nautical deities became gradually more dominant, pushing back our traditional chthonic gods and into the depths of the underworld. Summer turned to autumn. Autumn turned to winter. Nature died. Now that the marshes had frozen over, serpents stood at bay, and we built a shelter in the forest against the winter storms. But we couldn't stay in the same place for long, as food was always scarce. And I was 5 months pregnant at the time. I couldn't travel fast. During the coldest nights, Bifree would enter our camp, sleeping between the two of us, and her radiating warmth would drive away the freezing cold faster than any furnace. Bifree, the great wolf, our mother, always watching over us. We rested for a while in the castle hall, but the ground was cold and barren. And urged forward instinctively by our fatigue, we made our way to the S dolmen which stood nearby. Inside, its earthen interior, which turned out to be quite spacious, we constructed a comfortable burrow from moss and fallen leaves, while Ferris camped outside to defend us against potential threats. This used to be a grave mound, right? What a morbid place to hide in. A grave mound indeed, but it was far more than that. A place of worship and assembly hall. Her voice was beginning to drawl. We lived together with the dead back then, our ancestors. Nothing to be afraid of. If you say so. Still sounds scary to me. We slept all morning and most of the afternoon. And they still haven't found us? It seems unlikely. I awoke completely disoriented, more fatigued than before I fell asleep. The adrenaline that had fueled my previous actions had dwindled, making place for an intangible dread. When I looked on my phone, I saw a few missed calls from Ina. I dialed her number immediately. Ina? Abe, I've been trying to call you all day. What have you two been up to? Her voice sounded unwaveringly curious. I did what you told me to. I warned her. I provided Ina a summary of last night's escape. Has the town reacted to our disappearance yet? I heard some shouting coming from the central square this morning, but I'm not aware of any large-scale search operations. The church probably wants to keep May's escape under wraps for now, as to not fall under scrutiny for their actions. Anyway, what's your current whereabouts? Dolmen M4 near the northeastern slope. Please wait, I'll head down immediately. Make sure no one follows you. It wasn't long before we were alerted by Ferris's muted barking. There, Ferris. I brought you some sausages. Please be quiet. Ina, I'm glad you could make it. I brought groceries for lunch and dinner and tomorrow's breakfast. You probably haven't eaten for days. May cast Ina a ravenous glance. I also brought you some sleeping bags, as you'll probably have to stay here for at least another night. I'll start looking for better options this evening. I don't understand. Why did Rika do this to me? Ina gave May a comforting nudge. Don't worry, we'll find a solution. I promise. But let's eat first. Under the setting sun, we feasted on the bread and canned goods that Ina had brought us. After our meal, Ina, who still had a lot of research to do, got ready to leave. And while May stashed our new gained supplies inside our burrow, Ina took me aside for a second. I want to get May some clean underwear. The poor girl must be suffering. I felt the blood rush to my head. Would you happen to know her, sizes? Her sizes? Well, why don't you ask her? She blushed. I don't know, it's embarrassing. I mean, I thought you might know. I definitely don't. She pouted. Well, I think she's larger than me, but not by much. Now that I think of it, the clothing store is owned by church people. They may have become suspicious if I suddenly start buying larger sizes. You could tell them you've increased your dairy intake. Ina glared at me. She'll just have to do with some of my spares. Ina went home and May and I turned in early. And while I fell into a restless, fragmented sleep, May remained sitting upright, whispering long stories to herself. And sometimes it was just as though I felt a quiet rumbling passing through the stones below us. After breakfast, Ina returned carrying clean clothing for May and additional supplies. I could do with some boxer shorts, you know. Oh please, I'm not your mother. I've been working tirelessly all night just to get the two of you out of this sticky situation. I've scheduled a call with a representative of the women's shelter in Bremersburg this coming Thursday. May be able to stay with them for a while. The church won't be able to find her there. Have you looked into places for me to stay? Not really. But you'll have a roof above your head once they lock you away for kidnapping a mentally impaired individual. Hey! I'm not mentally impaired. May glared at Ina disappointingly. I'm sorry, I must have had the two of you mixed up for a second. Anyway, nay, I brought you something else. Ina reached into her bag and produced a large book. Illustrated Geological Lexicon was written on the cover. May eyed it apprehensively. I thought it might provide you with some distraction, while you're keeping a low profile. Thank you, Ina. It's just... not a very good reader. Ina smirked. Are you sure about that? Come on, let's take a look at this together. I'd love to find out how bad your reading truly is. Even Abe here can read, can't you, Abe? The two girls giggled as they seated themselves against the base of the dolmen. Why is Ina being a dick to us all of a sudden? What the fuck did we do to her? As soon as Ina opened the book to reveal the illustrations inside, May's initial hesitation turned into pure delight. Oh look, that's limestone. And hematite. Around noon, Ina got up to help me prepare lunch, while May remained fully engorged in her book. So how's she doing? Slow but steady. May didn't even know all the letters of the alphabet, you know. Just her name and the letter S. The church has been actively keeping her away from books, convincing her that she was incapable of reading. That's terrible. And nonsense. After just a few hours of practice, she's already reading words and short phrases. The human ability to read has evolved a relatively short time ago. It's not ingrained too deeply in the structure of our brains. An adult can overcome illiteracy quite rapidly with the right training. Other functions, such as speech, which need certain synaptic networks to develop, they cannot be learned at a later stage. Also, you may be interested to know, Karen called this morning. That's great. Is she making a steady recovery? I thought she was dead. Gradually. She's suffering a cerebral contusion which will take a while to fully heal. So she got bashed in the head. But she'll be able to leave the hospital soon. I took the liberty to tell her about May. I jumped. Don't worry, I haven't told her your whereabouts. And besides, she seems sympathetic to our cause. Karen told me how the mental health service is organised in this town. It's the council's responsibility to allocate accurate care to their beneficiaries. In Abbotsford, however, we only have one mental health care institute. It's called the Lazarus Foundation and it's run by the church. Due to Kuiper's influence on the town council, all underage patients with psychiatric needs are automatically redirected to Lazarus. Well, she's not underage, she's 19. There's no viable alternative. That's bad. Probably, but now that May is of age, we have the agency to change that. If her legal custodian states a case against the council, she may be able to have her funds redirected to a proper mental health organisation. One that actually works for her instead of doing everything within its power to keep her in the system. Unfortunately, her current custodianship lies with her parents, who are loyal to the church, which means that once they find her, the Lazarus Foundation will ship May off to Germany, never to be heard from again. I sighed. Also, there's one more interesting detail Karen let loose, which is, the Lazarus Foundation celebrates their 15th anniversary this year. Well, that's good for them. No, think about it, 15 years. It's 15 years ago that May was taken out of the regular school system and placed under the auspice of the church. Before that, mental health cases were handled by a regional healthcare provider. Lazarus was founded to harbour May, specifically for that purpose. What kind of disturbance could that girl have caused for an entire institute to be established solely for her cause? Good question. When evening fell, Ina returned home, and May and I returned to our sleeping bags inside the Mesolithic tomb. How long did you think we'll need to stay here? Just a short while longer. Ina says she has a plan. It's okay. I could stay here forever if we had to. I sleep much better here than at home. And you know, the nightmares have stopped. They've disappeared ever since we ran away. Almost as though they were urging me to flee, to move out over the indomitable marshes. Inch by inch, the sun painted the walls of our burrow with its morning rays. And after breakfast, May returned to her geology book, in which she progressed at an accelerating speed. while I just basked in the midday sun, paging through increasing lists of missed calls on my phone, some of which were from Rika, some from school, but none, unsurprisingly, from my father. Suddenly, May called me over. "Come, look at these marks." She was pointing at one of the stones, trailing her finger along a series of perpendicular grooves that ran along its side. This is called glacial striation. It's formed by the wear the stones suffer when it travelled inside the Great Glacier. It runs lengthways, along the face of the rock, as that's the direction that causes the least friction. While she was speaking, Ferris suddenly came up to us, visibly alarmed. And when I listened, I detected the faint sound of footsteps and voices coming from the forest trail. "Do you hear that? They're coming." She closed her book, and hurriedly we gathered our belongings, stashed our sleeping bags and food near the far inside the dolmen, hidden from view outside. "Come, this way." May took me by the hand, leading me in the opposite direction as where the sounds came from, while Ferris stayed nearby. Soon the chirping of birds and rustling of leaves had all but disappeared. Due to the lack of foliage, the castle hall was engulfed in a death-like silence that was only sporadically interrupted by the muting sound of a branch cracking underfoot. What could that have been? A search party, maybe? Do you think they'll look for us? It's okay. Just listen to the silence. We'll be able to hear them from miles away. All is covered in snow. I was heavy, almost too heavy to move, as I protected the tiny life inside of me, which felt close to dying out. Sigrid would always go out to hunt, bringing the cat to our hiding place. But winter was harsh, harsher than the winters before, and it spread its frosted fingers across the land, so that we found no refuge. We had no choice other than to return to the village, the secluded hamlet from which we'd fled the previous summer. There, we would plead for shelter and heat until our child was born, even though there was little chance they'd welcome us. And so, with the reluctance of captives, we embarked upon the journey home. Many times I was so slow that we moved at a crawl. Many times we had to interrupt our voyage to hide from the perpetual winter storms. How often was I close to giving up, fearing the little fire inside of me would extinguish if I even set one step further. But Sigurd comforted me, telling me to have courage, for he believed a great fate rested on the birth of our child, a fate connected to the very survival of our kind. And Bifree, the All-Mother, watched over us throughout, chasing away foes, bringing us small prey, and in her trail, I knew we followed an illuminated path. After 13 days of travel, we reached our destination, the secluded crest, setting of my tormented youth, under which our village lay, covered in snow, wrapped in silence, such absolute penetrating silence as though all life had vanished from miles around. And as we descended the ridge, we found the root of the silence. Under the snow lay buried an atrocity, burned down houses, bloodied corpses of men, women and children. The war had raged throughout our homestead, leaving no soul alive, no hearthstone unshattered. Our entire clan from which we had fled after our reunification had been routed out from the hillside for good. Of our village, only the great dolmen remained. As an unmovable testament to the perseverance of our ancestors, we took refuge between its solid walls. They looked up at me with saddened eyes, just like we do now. And while we sheltered, paralyzed by listlessness, a spring broke through. A soothing, delightful, warming spring that chased away the winter storms. And amidst the glow of that beautiful, heartwarming spring, I finally found the strength to give birth, under the comforting care of Sigurd, my own brother and husband. Brother and husband? With Bifree protecting us from harm. Yeah, that's what I gave birth. Anyway, to twins. For two flames had burned in me all that time. Beautiful, strong infants, boy and girl. The presence of the All-Mother ran strong in our bloodline, and for that blessed morning we were happy as we bathed and fed our newborn children. But with great joy came inconsolable grief. I was weak, Sigurd. The journey, the exposure to the cold, the grueling delivery, they left me wholly depleted. It was as though in keeping these two tiny beings safe, my own fire had given its final flame. I was weak. I could feel my fire dying out. All I saw was Sigurd holding our beautiful children. May? May! Sigurd. May had become a deathly pale as though she were close to passing out. In silence we sat and waited, unsure of our next move. And when 2 hours had passed without any suspicious sound, we reluctantly set off to pack our belongings. Alright, that seems like the perfect time to wrap this episode up because we're out of time for today. That was weird. Apparently she's pregnant to her brother who is also her husband. But that was in the past when they were cave people or something. I don't fucking know. I guess we'll figure that out eventually. At least I hope so. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me and I'll see you in the next one.